Now we're ready to create our new feature class in ArcMap. You can open ArcMap by just going to the Start button in Windows and typing in ArcMap, ARCMAP, enter, and you'll find it. So the first thing we've got to do is tell ArcMap that we're going to work from a new map using a blank template. I'll click on my templates. I'll choose the blank map. And then before we do anything else, we've got to tell ArcMap where we're going to store our data. So to do that, down at the bottom of this window, we have to specify a Geo Database, a database for holding our spatial data. And I'm going to click on this folder to do that. So I'm going to find a folder that I've set up. I don't have a connection to it right now, so I'm going to go over to the Connect to Folder button and define a connection to a drive on my local disk called Projects, and I'm going to make a new folder under Projects for Fire Hydrant Project, and I'm going to connect to that folder. I'm going to click on it to make sure that it's properly read here. I lost it. There it is. Okay, and then I need to make a new Geo Database inside of this folder, so I click on the button second from the right. It says New File Geo Database. Give it a name. I'll call it Fire Hydrants. And then I'll select it to make sure that the name shows up properly in the name field here. Click the Add button, and I'm ready to make my new map document. So what do I see? Nothing. So let's start out by adding a base map. We go up to the Add Data button and the little arrow down by it to choose Add Base Map. And I'm going to use the Streets base map when it comes up. And when we first add it, it's going to be for the entire world. So we're going to need to zoom in a little bit here in a second, waiting for it to load. So I'm going to use the Find tool, the binoculars, to locate my town. So I go not to Features, I go to Locations, make sure it's on the World Geocode Service, and put in my town name, Fayetteville, AR, hit Find. It finds Fayetteville, Arkansas. I go down here to the results and I right click on Fayetteville, Arkansas and say Zoom to. And that will take me into Fayetteville. So now my map is set to the extent where I want to be working, and I'm ready to make my new feature class. To do that, we need to work in the catalog. It should be over on the right side of your window, but if it's not, you can go up to the Windows menu, go Windows, Catalog, or you can click on the Catalog button. Either one of those will open it up, and we should be able to go to our Geo Database by clicking on the button at the top of the catalog that says Go to Default Geo Database. And it takes us right down there to that Geo Database I just made. And I'm going to right click on it and say New Feature Class. It went the wrong way. You probably couldn't see that. New Feature Class. I'm going to call this feature class, actually I'll just call it Hydrants here, because I can't have spaces or weird characters. I can use an underscore to separate words in the name, but nothing else. But in the alias, I can have spaces, I can have weird characters, whatever I want. So down there, I'm going to say Fire Hydrants with a space. And that's the name that I'll see in my table of contents. Okay, what kind of feature did we say we're going to use? We're going to use a point feature for this. Not lines, not polygons, points for this one. We don't click either of these boxes here. We go to the Next button. And yours is probably not going to look quite like this because you won't have a favorite saved yet, so you'll have to go to the Projected Coordinate Systems, scroll down and find UTM, and then find NAD 1983. I'm clicking on the plus next to the folder each time. And if you're in Arkansas, the kind of default coordinate system in GIS in Arkansas is UTM Zone 15N for north. So we're going to select that, and I can add that to my favorites by clicking on the star button, and now I've got it saved for the next time I come in here. I don't have to go looking for it. Click Next, The XY tolerance is fine. Next. This one is also fine. Next. And here's where we've got to do some serious work. So under the field name is where we're going to add the heading for each column that we want to add to the attribute table, the names of the type of attributes we want to have. So first thing I said we were going to use was an hydrant ID number. So I'm going to call it hydrant underscore ID. I can't have spaces or weird characters in these names either, and I can't start with a number either. And for each one of these fields, I have to tell it what kind of data is going to go in there. So for the fire hydrant ID, it's going to be a number. The question comes down, is it going to be a number that has a decimal point, or is it going to be some kind of an integer with no decimal point? For an ID number, it's probably going to be an integer. And I'll tell you how to keep this simple. All you've got to do is remember to use long integers if it's an integer, and double if it's a decimal type number, decimal point number. So I'll use a long integer. And then the next column is going to be the manufacturer. And I'm going to do the same thing. And so this one is going to be text. Now for a text field, I also need to specify the length of the field, and I'm going to say, maybe 30 characters down there should be good. Oh, and I forgot on that hydrant ID, I want to have a more clear name. So I'm going to go click back up there on the hydrant ID. There's something called an alias, which is an alternative name. So I can go down here and just like before, we can have spaces and odd characters. So let's go down here, and I'm going to call this fire hydrant ID number. Okay, then below manufacturer, I'm going to have the number of hose connections, the 2.5-inch connection. So I'll say hose underscore connectors. And that's going to be also an integer, so a long integer. And so the alias for that, let's say number of hose connectors, and I'll say in parentheses that's 2 1/2 inch. And I know that the standard fire hydrants have 2 of these connectors, so I'm going to put in a default value. So if I don't change it, it will always have a 2 in that particular column. Then we'll go to the pump connectors, and this will also be a long integer, and I'll call this the number of pump connectors, which is 4.5 inches. So I can get pretty elaborate on these names down here, and usually there's only one of those, so that will be my default there. Next we have the flow, or the rated flow, so I'll just call it flow here, and that can also be a long integer, and although it's going to be much bigger than 1 or 2. And the alias for that is going to be rated flow, and then in parentheses gallons per minute at 20 pounds per square inch. And there will not be a default value for that. Next we have the color of the top and barrels. I'm sorry, the top and caps. So let's call this top color, and that's going to be text. And I know that there's a limited number of colors for this, so I actually want to restrict what people can use for a color for these. So we're going to come back to that in just a second here. For now, let's fix the alias name. I'll call it color of top and caps, and the length, let's make it about 12 characters long. Should fit any color I can think of. And finally, we're going to have the barrel color, the main body of the hydrant, which will also be a text. And we'll call this color of barrel. Actually, we'll say main barrel. And I happen to know that yellow is the recommended color for that. So we're going to put in yellow as a default value and also make that 12 characters long. Okay, I'm going to save it for now, hit finish. It's going to add it to my map. And I'm going to do something. I'm going to make something called a domain, which is a list or a range of allowable values for an attribute in a feature class. So to do that, I'm going to go to the catalog, open it up, and find my fire hydrants Geo Database, and right-click on the actual Geo Database, not the hydrants feature class, and go to the properties for the Geo Database. I've got two tabs in here, a general tab, and I want the domains tab. And so in here, we're going to create a list of values that can be used in any feature class that's in this Geo Database. And I'm going to call this one flow_colors. And description can be kind of like an alias. I'll say National Fire Protection Agency hydrant colors. And the field type is going to be text, so I changed that to text for colors. It's going to be coded values. That means I'm going to have a code and a description for each one of these values, and I'm going to make them exactly the same. So the code, first one is going to be light blue. Oops, light blue, and description exactly the same. Next one is going to be green, and then we're going to have orange, and finally red, which is the lowest rating. And there's a possibility there may be some fire hydrants out in my town that aren't painted to this scheme, so I'm going to allow other in here, which will tell me that it has not been properly painted. So once this is done, I'm going to say OK, and I can have several different domains made inside of a file Geo Database. So I could have names of restaurants if I was mapping out restaurants in my town or anything like that, where I want to make it where I can have a pull down in the Collector app and choose from a menu of specific colors or values. So I'll say OK, and now I'm going to go back to my hydrants, right click properties, and I'm going to go to the fields tab here, which looks exactly like where we were before. And I'm going to go to the top color, and notice I now have an entry down here for domain. I'll click in there and choose flow colors for my domain, and so now that menu, that domain of allowed values, is going to be associated with this particular attribute. So I'm going to say OK. And so what does that look like? Let's open up the table. Right click on fire hydrants, say open attribute table. And let me squeeze it in here so you can see it. And so we've got the fire hydrant ID number, manufacturer, number of hose connections, number of pump connectors, rated flow, color of top and caps, color of main barrel. We're good. I see that it doesn't like my my inch symbol there. I may change that later, but we'll live with it for now.